Welcome to the second one in our series of videos about bringing Emacs power to Scala development. In this video we're going to talk about navigation, that is, commands to move around the directories of your Scala project to locate files, classes, objects, methods, and everything else. In Emacs for Scala, we've bundled several powerful file managers as well as Emacs' own built-in capabilities. Enzyme also gives us navigation capabilities specially tailored to Scala development. Let's start with dir tree, a mode we've already briefly seen in our last video. You can press Command D to start dir tree. It will prompt for a directory. We'll give it our example directory here. And you see a simple tree view of your directory that you can browse and move around in to work with your files. In dir tree, moving the mark to a directory to the folder symbol and pressing enter will expand that folder. Putting the point on the name of a folder and hitting enter will actually fire up dir ed mode on that folder, which is another mode we'll look at a little later on. Now going back to our pane, putting the point on a file, either the symbol or the file name itself, will in fact open that file in the other pane. It's quick and easy to move around within dir tree itself. You can simply use single letter abbreviations, N to move to the next node, P to move to the previous node. U will actually move up to the next directory containing the current point. G will refresh the tree in case something's changed on disk. You can actually have multiple folders open at once. Let's open up both app and, let's say, project. And then I can use, let's say I go back up to app here. I can use the letter J to move to the next sibling of my current folder. So you see how it jumps over the files there and moves to the next one at this same level. And K to move to the previous sibling. Again, I can press enter to just fold that folder closed again. I can also move to a specific folder. So I'll go previous up to app here and type bang to close all except this folder. So as you can see, there's a lot of keys for actually manipulating the view of your files and folders. You can also use iSearch, interactive search in Emacs, to find files and folders by their name, to be able to search for basically any string within the directory tree. As you can see, dir tree gives you a nice simple way to get started with file and directory browsing. There are many other key bindings for it, and if you look in the key bindings file on our blog, you'll see all of the remainder and find a link to the dir tree manual. Dir tree is using dir ed mode under the covers, but you can also use dir ed mode directly. It's very powerful. Press Ctrl XD. Oops. Ctrl XD to start dir ed mode, and we'll choose our demo directory again. Root of that directory, and what you see is a list of files and directories. We can press Ctrl N or space or just plain N to move to the next line. Control P moves back to the previous line, as does delete or just plain P. So we can move around our list of directories. If we have a lot of files and we need to move directly to one file, we can hit J, type a portion of that file's name, and jump immediately to that file to take some operation on it. If we want the details of permissions and so forth for every file, we can use close bracket to turn this information on, and open bracket to turn it back off again and go back to just a list of plain files. We can also move to the previous directory by hitting the hat symbol, Shift 6, and then come back into our current directory or whichever directory we're on by pressing return. Now some of these are subdirectories of our one example directory. I can look into those and keep them all visible at once by using I. to insert the subdirectory into my current direct buffer. Now I can work with the files in that directory in the same fashion, so I can hit I again and open that as a second sublevel directory, and then search and do operations across all of these files at once. When we're on a directory name, we can use $, to close that up and just see the name as opposed to all of the details. $, again to open it back up. And we can use meta $, to open all, or meta $, to close all, down to just their directory names. And in addition, control meta P and control meta N will move amongst just the directory names, so I can jump from one subdirectory name to the next without having to go across all the intervening files. Now we can open a file for editing it just by going to its name and pressing enter. We immediately see the file. Now if I kill that buffer with Control XK, I come back and I see dirred just where I left it. An interesting variation on dirred mode could be launched by saying image dirred, and let's say the current directory, and it will generate a directory of thumbnail images of any image files that are in the current directory. I can then navigate amongst those and even open them as I require. Let's close that again. Close our lovely tractor picture, and we'll go back to just one pane. Now you notice some of the files are currently marked. Those were the files that were marked as image files when I went into image dirred mode. I can mark files. I can also unmark all files that are currently marked with a capital U, and I can mark files by hitting M, or unmark any single file using lowercase u. If I have a zip file in my directory, I can actually open it just like any other file, and even open files that are within that zip file, all without necessarily unzipping the zip file directly. Emacs understands that it's a zip file and navigates into it automatically. And back to our dirred window again. Now a few special shortcut keys have been defined. We have Command capital O, which will find a file by name in a specified directory. So let's say within this directory, I'm going to say global.scala, which I can see is there. And this is the result of a find, which is itself a dirred window. So if I say there's the file I want, in this case there was only one, I hit enter and I'm in the file. Kill that buffer, I'm back to my search. Kill the search buffer and I'm back to dirred again. I can also say command lowercase o, and this will do a find grep, which means I'm not going to find a file by its name, I'm going to find a file by its contents. So in this case, if I say, I'll find something login, here are all of the different files that contain that string. This happens to be the one I'm interested in. Again, I can search down through this list for it, and I go immediately into the file that has that string. Another interesting capability of dirred is I can pick a file, type exclamation, and specify any command line command that I want to run on that file. In this case, wc-l to give me a count of the lines in that file. There's 24 lines in global.scala. That can also be applied across multiple files. We can, of course, if we still need further programmability, we can always say, take me out to a shell in the current directory. Now I have a full shell available to me. I can do everything that I need to do at the Unix shell. And I'm right back to my dirred. So dirred can do a lot more than simple navigation that I've shown here, though. It can also, as the name implies, edit directories. Rename, delete, copy files, copy directories, move directories around. See the full dirred manual link on the key bindings page in the blog for details on all of that. Enzyme also provides a number of commands specifically tailored for moving around and between Scala files. Let's open a Scala file here. So global.scala. and we'll open the inspector. That's Control CVV. This window is called the inspector and allows us to search for types, classes, object names. For example, if we wanted new decision view, for the sake of argument, we give it a second there, and you'll notice that we can navigate amongst these with Control N and Control P, choose the one we want, which in this case happens to be the first one, hit enter, and we're immediately looking at the class definition of new decision view. I could have entered a series of keywords, space separated, to further refine my search. This doesn't just work on classes and objects and so forth, it even works on methods. So for example, CVV again, and we'll type, let's say, update something. Yeah, update with importances, that's the one I'm looking for, and I go directly to the definition of that method. So I didn't even need to know the class name ahead of time. Let's go back to decisions.scala here then, and we'll search down to a class definition, class use rather, decision repository. Yes, that's the one we want. Oops, search, decision repository. There we are, hit enter. And I can jump directly to the definition of that class when our cursor's on its name with method. Another navigation we have available is Control CVP, which allows us to inspect the classes in the current package. So for example, and there we see the classes defined and the class hierarchies within our current package. Hitting Q, again we're right back in our source code. We can also navigate to errors in our project if there are any compilation or type errors when the type checker runs on our project. By typing CVE, we immediately find the error navigator. If we tab down to this error, for example, and see what file it's in, you can see that that should have been a def, not a dep. Back in our decisions.scala file, one final navigation that's very powerful is the ability to inspect a type under the cursor. So for example, if we come up to, let's say, controller here, and we say Control CVI, we launch what's called the type inspector again, and now you see that there are links available to us where we could actually look at the documentation for all of these types that are related and inheritors from the type that we're looking at. So for example, if we go across here to controller and we hit enter on doc, now you can't see that because it's in the other window, so I'll move it over here. We immediately opened a browser window in the play documentation for the class controller, and I'm looking at the Scala doc for the class that I was working with. Pretty handy. One final kind of navigation we can look at is navigation within a file, in this case a Scala file, although much of this applies to any kind of file. So again, within our decisions.scala file, we can begin and move between lines with, of course, Control N and Control P, just the normal Emacs keystrokes. We can move backwards in words with Meta B, forward in words with Meta F for forward. We can move to the next parenthesis structure with Control Meta U and D for up and down. So Control Meta up moves to the next parenthesis structure, curly brace or the other kind of parentheses, and Control Meta down moves down that structure. Within a line, we can go to the beginning of a line with Control A. We can, of course, go to the end of a line with Control E. Interestingly, we can also go to the beginning of the indent with Meta M. That's a handy one for doing programming. We can go to a specific line number with Control L. Let's go to line, oh, we were already on line 27. Bad choice. Let's go to line 67 because that wasn't visible in the buffer. We can also, of course, search in our file with Control S. So we look for Alternative, for example, we can cancel our search or hit return to remain at the point of the search. Hit Control S again to jump to the next search match. We can also search backwards in the file with Control R. Control Meta Search, so Control Meta and Search, is just like ordinary search, except now I'm searching on a regex. That can be very handy for moving within a file as well. Let's say we have a couple of compilation errors that have cropped up in our file. Oh, I don't know, let's make a name wrong there, and we'll make a method name wrong here. When we save, oh, of course that was actually a variable, which is perfectly okay to be that name. We can move to the next error by saying meta n for next, or if I was down here, let's say meta p for previous, to jump to the previous compile or type check error. We'll just fix that back up again. I can't stand to see the red. We can also, an interesting alternative for moving around is, let's say we're in the middle of this expression, we can also use Control CV dot to select what's called the syntactic context, and then we can expand that with dot. And notice how I'm selecting more and more of the expression, and I'm getting the containing portion of the expression as I go further out, and I can shrink it with comma. That can be very powerful when you're selecting chunks of code to do refactorings to and so forth. Saves a lot of back and forth with the cursor. We can of course scroll with Control V and Meta V to go in the opposite direction. One other search capability that is plugged into Emacs for Scala is what's called Ace Jump Mode. This is an eLisp extension that someone wrote that gives us the ability to very quickly jump around within any file, but particularly handy within a Scala file. Let's go to the top of, the top of our file, and we'll type Control 0, and it asks for the head character, and I'm going to say in this case D. Now notice what happened to the screen. Every letter that begins with every word that begins with the letter D, I'll get this straight, has been marked with a unique symbol. In this case, letters of the alphabet. It'll go into numbers as well if necessary. Now let's say that the one I want to jump to is the one down there on line 33, which is, and specifically the one that is the decision view, not decision form, the variable definition. I can simply hit J, and I'm on that particular instance. This allows you to move around a file very rapidly. You can also use Ace Jump Mode and apply it to lines. If I say Control, oops, wrong button. If I say Control 1, Ace Jump Mode can also be applied to all the lines in a file with Control 1. Now you see every line is designated with its own unique character. And let's say I want to jump down to line 33, I just hit capital G, and I'm on line 33. I can also apply it to character search. Control 2 in this case asks me for a query character. I have a lot of things that start with the letter O, so I'll use that. Now actually not just words that start with O, but any O in the buffer is now visible to me with a unique character identifying it. So if I wanted to jump, for example, to the middle of the word new decision form down on line 42, I can just hit O, and I'm there. That's it for most of the navigation capabilities that Emacs for Scala brings to editing and moving around Scala files. Join us next time. We'll talk about actually editing a Scala file and making changes and how you can use Emacs Power, at least in a basic fashion, to make that extremely easy. Thanks for joining us.